Okay, thank you, Karen. Good afternoon, everybody. Apologies for me being a few minutes late. Welcome to the Council's Cabinet meeting. I think everybody else who I expect is here. Do we have any apologies? Councillor Peatfield and Councillor Martin. Thanks, Karen. I don't have any notice of any late items. Are there any? No. Nor do I have any petitions. Identification of urgent items to which call-in will not apply. I don't think we have any. Cabinet, do we have any declarations of interest? No. Thank you. Minutes of the meeting, agenda item 6, held on the 12th of July. Somebody confirm those as a true record? Thanks, Councillor Dinser. Councillor Whitby seconding that. Matters referred to recommendations from the Executive Scrutiny Board, which was on Monday evening, I believe. We'll deal with those in the usual way at each of the agenda items as we get there. So, the first key decision under item 8 is the South Derby Growth Zone and Infinity Garden Village. Do we know who's taken up there?
It's me, Chair.
Oh, over there. Hey, Chair.
I'm a substitute, forgive me.
Brilliant, you're hiding over there. All right, all yours, Verna, thank you.
Thank you. Verna Bayliss, Director of Sustainability. This is a procedural report to highlight the land within the Derby boundary that Derbyshire need to acquire as part of the Land Assembly to deliver the new A50 junction for the South Derby Growth Zone and links to existing road network within Infinity Park Derby, and also to alter the highway as required as part of the construction of the scheme. So 4.2 of the report shows the extent of the site. You've got a little map there. And these are the enabling infrastructure works for the significant housing and commercial development that is associated with this large-scale project. So Derbyshire County Council is the lead for this project, and there is an appropriate multi-authority governance in place. The project is fully funded based on current cost estimates. Planning permission is in place, and that included extensive consultation for these enabling works. Authorisation has already been delegated to Derbyshire County Council by Cabinet to do this, as confirmed in the Cabinet minutes appended to the report. So the project is making steady progress. Derbyshire have entered into a contract with Galliford Try for the highways works, and detailed design through a design and build contract is being undertaken and will inform a final business case. Should CPO be needed, then start on site will be around early 2025. If not, it could be as early as next year. Every effort is being made to reach agreement rather than to move to something like CPO. It's very much preferred that we do this on a voluntary basis, so individual negotiations are going on between the County Council and the landowners. And the detail of that is set out within the large Derby County Council report that is in Appendix 1. And that report sought authorisation for land acquisition, either in outright terms or through the making of a compulsory purchase order. It could be that it's the full land, or it could be that it's rights over specific things like drainage, for instance. And it also includes the authorisation for the highways changes through a side roads order. Derbyshire Cabinet approved that on the 27th of July. So this report is for information to Derby and for noting. And thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Verna. Cabinet, any questions, comments? Okay, Councillor Poulter. There was a recommendation from the Exec Scrutiny Board.
Thank you, Chair. Yes.
Do you want to just talk through that?
The board welcomed this initiative, this long-going initiative, which is potentially greatly beneficial to the south of Derby. There was some discussion around and some concern around the lack of detail over the climate change implications. But as you said earlier on, this was agreed earlier on in the year that Derbyshire County Council would run this. But there was a resolution from the board that says that they recommend that all councillors should be given training on how climate change implications are calculated for the benefit of all members of the council. If it's included in the normal training for members in the course of the year, it'll benefit them to see how the climate change implications are reported on such documents.
Thank you, Councillor Poulter. Councillor Hassel, anything? Okay, just on that recommendation for training, maybe, I'm not sure, I think you've been away, Chris, but there is some training already scheduled in. It's on the 8th of November for all councillors to attend, and it's training around the whole sort of climate change agenda, but how the calculations, climate change impact are worked out will be included in that training as well. So that recommendation is absolutely fine. Anything else, Councillor Palmer? No. Okay, so with that recommendation, with the training already happening, so at on page 1, recommendation 2.1 and recommendation 2. All those in favour? Okay, thank you. That's approved. The next key decision, very exciting news, is on libraries. So Derby Libraries delivering a sustainable model for our libraries. I think Claire's pointing at Charles is going to take that. But just before I bring Charles in, no, we all know how important libraries are as a resource for our communities, offering a number of valuable services, and especially to those who are most vulnerable in our society. We made a manifesto commitment to keep all libraries in Derby open. That's absolutely what we intend to do, and this is a very significant step towards achieving that. The team have been working remarkably hard in a very short period of time so far to make sure we produce and come up with a model which is affordable, sustainable, and going forward takes the risk away for any of our community managed libraries to face closure. It's an absolute priority of ours as an administration, working with the fantastic officer corps we've got in this area, and our communities, our volunteers across the libraries and other organisations. I'm sure and I'm positive we'll keep all our libraries open and put an end to the concerns and the worries that were created in recent months with all the uncertainty around our libraries. So just with that introduction, I'll pass on to Charles to take us through the paper, and then we'll open it out in the usual way. Thanks, Charles.
Thanks, Chair. So this report provides an update on our library provision and the journey that we've been on with our libraries, and outlines several options available to the Cabinet on future library models. There's detail in the report about the background and context regarding how we have got to where we are. I don't intend on going into that detail, but happy to answer questions if they arise afterwards. There are 5 recommendations in the report. I'd like to draw your specific attention to 3 of these. So the initial recommendation, or the first recommendation, is that the report recommends Cabinet to agree to the development of detailed business cases for 2 preferred options. Subject to the approval of that recommendation, the report further recommends the previous EOI process will be superseded, so Cabinet should note that will therefore cease, and that the report recommends that our statutory library provision and our 10 community libraries should be considered as a complete library package. Officers have done some exploratory work and have therefore been able to present 2 preferred options to Cabinet for business case development. The preferred options contained within the report are for us to create or consider creating a new trust to deliver our library provision, or to transfer the full provision to an existing trust that operates. Other options were considered, and they can be seen in the appendix that is attached to the report, and they were remain in-house remain in-house but partner with other councils, establish a trading company, outsource to existing social enterprises, which is similar to the previous EOI process that was underway, a joint venture, and to close community libraries. As I say, the appendices document supports and details the positive and negatives for each of those options. Happy to take questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charles. Mr. Youth Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. A question I wanted to ask about the libraries was that lots of young people access their local library, as not every school has a library, and in this case, St Andrews Special School, which is why some sort of support should be provided for libraries that are not obliged to be maintained by the council, in particular support for Chaddeston Library, which is the closest library to St Andrews, as young people rely on the key skills and support they provide. For example, if that's access to computers, to complete homework, or access to books to support their studies. Hence, I believe it's vital that this library is supported so that our young people are supported, especially those that are most vulnerable in these special schools. And with the added pressures already upon SEND and the full capacity of special schools in Derby, our young people need all the support that they can get. So what I wanted to ask was if we can get confirmation if this library would be supported. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great question. And the answer is really simple. It's yes. All libraries will be supported because all libraries are important to us. All libraries are important to the users and the residents. And perfect example there in Chaddeston Library, but there'll be stories like that behind every single library in the city, and that's why it's important we keep them all open and not just cherry pick 1, 2 or 3 in certain areas of the city. All libraries are equally important. Thank you for that question. Councillor Poulter, there was 5 recommendations from the Exec Scrutiny Board on Monday evening. Do you quickly, because we've all read them, and briefly take us through those 5 recommendations?
I can do that, Chair. It wasn't brief, the discussion on it, because it quite quickly became apparent that there were many gaps in this report and areas that of concern for the Scrutiny Board, which have led to the 5 recommendations that you see. And the first one, basically, it calls on the Cabinet to ensure that the GDPR issues are finally sorted, because that's the one thing that is handicapping volunteers and other people engaged in the library provision. So it calls on the Cabinet to ensure that GDPR is sorted. The second one is in relation to the lack of financial detail and understanding of the options that you are considering. We absolutely understand that as a new administration, you hold that same desire as us as we did, to keep the libraries open, but this report doesn't identify the costs, the ongoing costs or the costs in relation to discussing these options. So rather than delegate the costs to the Cabinet member and the strategic director, the board calls on the Cabinet to bring the details of the costs back to this and to the most appropriate scrutiny committee, so that there's openness and transparency on the budgetary provision for whatever option is taken up. The third one is in relation to there was query around why the 5 statutory libraries have been lumped in with this and why they are not considered up and running and appropriate. But the recommendation is to ask Cabinet to ensure that further work is not prejudged in relation to whether or not the statutory libraries are included in this process, and that you keep your options open. The fourth is in relation to consultation. There's a lot of work gone into consultation in relation to the expressions of interest. Because you've got 2 new options, you can't rely on that consultation to inform the business cases that you're going to prepare. So you're going to need to rerun an effective consultation in relation to this. And the final one was in relation to the timetable. Volunteers and the public have too long been in doubt about what will happen with the libraries. The report has absolutely no timelines or timetable for this report, and the scrutiny board urges Cabinet to be very clear about and that come back to the council with a firm timetable. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for keeping that as brief as you could. Councillor Hassel, Councillor Prosser, anything?
Yeah, just briefly, I think it was around the concerns around the current statutory provision, in that obviously the previous sort of iteration of library proposals didn't include those, and it was just reassurance around whatever this process tells us may or may not be our statutory provision going forward, and ensuring that we do remain and keep our library provision across the city as it is now.
Okay, thank you. I'll bring the Cabinet in a second, just addressing a couple of those points. Thank the Scrutiny Board for their deliberations over this and making these recommendations. So the first one around the whole GDPR issue. I mean, it's been an ongoing issue for a while. One, Councillor Bolton, which I'm sure you were frustrated about over the last 5 years without being able to resolve, and it's taken a long time to resolve. I'm not sure quite why that is, but again, it's worth highlighting here because we'll make sure within the new setup and the new arrangements that can be tackled. But you know, please do reflect on the fact in 5 years not too much progress was made on that. The second one around the business case, absolutely, you know, will be open and transparent, if you want me to use those words, to make sure the business case is well, A, stacks up, and B, is open to scrutiny, unlike previous projects like the performance venue, for example, where promises were made to make the business case open for scrutiny, and then promises were quickly and swiftly reneged upon. The third point around to make sure we, you know, the statutory provision and the community managed library provision is kept separate. I'm not quite sure what you mean by the recommendation there. So, Councillor Hassel, I think that's the more direct question, which clarifies it. And what I'd say at this stage is by considering the full library provision together, we can meet both our statutory obligations, but also absolutely, you know, optimise what we want to do in providing library provision for the wider city in all of the libraries that exist now. So this is a great opportunity to review where we are and make sure library provision is the best it can be without closing any facilities in the future. Meaningful consultation, absolutely, we'll consult, and we already have been. Cabinet members will come in, I'm sure, in a minute. Members have contacted volunteers and partners in their areas, in their wards, and that's been a positive exercise and engagement process already, and we'll make sure as we draw more and more conclusions in firming up a proposal that volunteers, partner organisations are fully kept abreast on this. And the timetable, I'll let Charles come in and answer this one in a second, but rest assured, I'll make sure, and the Cabinet will make sure, we move at pace. We do this as quickly as we possibly can, but make sure it's done diligently also, and we'll also make sure that the uncertainty created, Councillor Poulter, over the last few months is stopped. I mean, I'm not going to dwell on this point too much because this is a positive report and I want to keep it positive, but it was only back in December when you said this was the end of the managed library project, and we're looking at keeping the more popular ones open and hope that local communities will join us in doing that in places like Spondon and Alice Street. That was just in December last year. We had a further paper in January, and then another one in March, where the funding for this was all, and the strategy, if I may add, was all just made up on the hoof. We absolutely want to end that. It's not good reputationally for the local authority. It's not good for the residents we're here to serve, and it's definitely not good for the volunteers who give up their time, their precious time, to help in libraries. We'll come up with a sustainable and concrete plan going forward to make sure all libraries are open and the provision of libraries is available to residents across the city, and not just in areas like you highlighted in Spondon and Alistry. Cabinet, anybody else like to contribute that? And I'll bring Charles back in if he needs to. I'll just start from one end. Councillor Dinser.
Thank you, Councillor Shanker. Yeah, I mean, this paper is a great news story. It is giving certainty, and it is showing a way in terms of finding not just a temporary response or a solution to the problem of keeping our community managed libraries still open, but it's actually giving a plan which can be sustainable and not something which is going to be hit and miss. So I think it's a great news story. We need to shout from the rooftops about this. I know that, I mean, some of the recommendation of the Executive Scrutiny Board about consulting and liaising with volunteers and friends of library groups, the experience I've had, I mean, I took this report to the Blakeries volunteers who have been managing stoically the library through uncertain times, and they were really positive. They have been really positive since the council has taken back control, and the liaison and the communication and the information updates about what is going on, what is not going on, has been fed back to me as being really positive and much improved from previously, when there was a outside organisation engaging, relating, communicating with them. So there's some positive messages about how valued they feel by the officers of the City Council in our library section, who have been supportive in keeping them informed and actually working with them to see how they develop those things. The biggest concern before this report and some of the positive decisions we've made has been about GDPR being used as an excuse for libraries being maintained but not being allowed to borrow or lend books. That certainty will disappear with this way forward. The financial security of saying that up to 24-25, funding has been secured so that the libraries can continue to function is there, was, as you say, Chair, speedily we look at a solution which will be securing not just the statutory libraries, which are being questioned here by the Leader of the Opposition and the Chair of the Executive Board, but the community managed libraries as well. That can only be good news, and that's a positive. That's the positive we should be talking about. And some of the other issues, I mean, quite rightly, open and transparent, bringing decisions about where we're going to go next through the process of cabinet and therefore exec scrutiny is part of the process. We're not going to hide from that, are we? We're going to go and use it and inform and get feedback and make this happen. It's a positive story. Let's celebrate it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dinser. Absolutely. Councillor Hazelgrave.
Thank you, Councillor Shanker. So the comments and question by our youth mayor were very relevant, and I hope that, or we hope that he's been reassured by the response. The reference to volunteers who are the backbone and lifeblood of libraries and their future, we thank them for their work and commitment to their communities and hope that any misgivings they may have will be resolved by the process we're engaging upon.
Thank you, Councillor Hazelgrave. Councillor Khan.
Yeah, very briefly, Chair. I think Councillor Dinser didn't just sum it up. I mean, he went into great detail about, what is in But I don't honestly want to deflect any attention away from this. It's a positive report. It's very good for the officers, the administration and the residents of Derby. But suffice to say, Councillor Poulter, the uncertainty that was under you is now gone, and I think people know exactly where they stand. And as I said, I don't really want to go into sort of politically or politicising this. It's just a good report for the residents of Derby.
Councillor Whitby.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it is a really positive report. This hopefully ends the, 8, 9 years of constant jeopardy for the library service, never quite knowing, where it's going to go to. The words in the report, sustainable and long-term, that's exactly what we're trying to achieve. And I think this, this may be the only path we have to being both fiscally responsible and socially responsible. So I fully endorse it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitby. Thank you, Cabinet, for all those contributions. Charles, I'm not sure if there's anything else to add, but I'll let you come back in if there is anything you feel.
Just to assure Cabinet that I'm very aware of the aspirations to resolve this as quickly as possible. I'm also aware that there's an aspiration to do this with long-term sustainability in mind. The point about the recommendation to produce a timetable, we wanted to allow Cabinet to hear the recommendations today and take a view on that before we could put together a timetable that was realistic. So that time frame will come out shortly after today's meeting.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks for that, Charles. Okay, Cabinet, so recommendations on page 1 of item 9, 2.1 to 2.5, please. Okay, thank you. That's carried. Moving on to key decision at item 10, further integration between the Council and Derbyshire Community Health Services. Kirsty.
Yes, hi everybody. I'm Kirsty McMillan, report author, and I'll talk you briefly through this proposal. The paper today is asking for Cabinet to consider us launching some consultation around entering a formal partnership agreement with Derbyshire Community Health Services, who are one of our local NHS Foundation trusts. And the aim of this is to create a single service that will help people remain at home for longer, and also make sure that if they're at home or are on their way home from hospital, that happens in a timely way, and that as far as possible people get access to rehabilitation and reablement. As it currently stands, we deliver these services separately, although we work very, very closely together. And the report sets out the reasons why we want to test out whether we should come together in a formal arrangement. We're able to do that under a bit of legislation known as the Section 75 of the NHS Act from 2006, where that piece of legislation enables local authorities and NHS bodies to pool their resources for the benefit of local people. So the point of the consultation is very much about trying to gauge whether the people who would benefit from us coming together have got some views and ideas that we need to take into account. So the recommendations, as they're stated, are around agreeing the proposed consultation and delegating the delivery of that to Andy Smith, our Strategic Director, in conjunction with the relevant Cabinet member, and then also to agree to receive a further report back after we've completed the consultation, which you would then take into account before you consider whether we should indeed enter into a more formal arrangement. And the only thing I'll point out in the report under section 5.1 is just really the sorts of people that we'd want to try and consult with. So there would be some form of questionnaire that we would use, but we also want to try and get out and speak to people really and try and tap in particularly to people who may have experience of using NHS or social care services. So in section 5.1, there's not an exhaustive list, but it certainly gives you an indication of the sorts of ideas and the views that we'll be seeking. Do you want me to carry on, or should I just take some questions if need be?
No, that's absolutely fine. I think, Kirsty, unless you think there's anything more pertinent that you want to highlight. I note the Exec Scrutiny Board resolved to note the report. There's no further questions from Exec Scrutiny Board. Cabinet, anything further? Councillor Hazelgrave.
Just that it's very welcome to see a fairly comprehensive list, but not exhaustive, of people and groups that will be consulted on this, so that we get a really good picture of what people think about it and how it might be improved, so that we can actually, when we come to the making the agreement and the partnership work kind of formalised, we actually take that into account and meet those concerns and suggestions by residents.
Thank you, Councillor Hazelgrave. Yeah, I mean, I'll just reiterate the importance in this space of and the value of partnerships. It's a huge area, and we have to work in partnership to be able to be successful. But I will also stress this is the start of a consultation, and we'll do the consultation, and then a report will come back to Cabinet. Okay, any comments? So, Councillor Swan.
Yeah, just looking at the dates that you've included for the consultation, you've said August, September and October. I'm thinking we're already into August. Is there any chance we can extend that?
Yeah,
Kirsty.
this is not a statutory consultation where we'd have to allow a fixed time scale. But I think we wouldn't want to do anything that was shorter than 2 months. So I'm confident, even though it's the start of August, that we will have enough time. What we're trying to build in, I suppose, is some time to do some analysis at the end of that process with a view to trying to come back to Cabinet before Christmas.
Thanks, Kirsty. Okay, Cabinet, item 10, recommendations 2.1 and 2.2. All those in favour? Okay, thank you. That's carried. Okay, item 11, the 23-24 quarter 1 financial monitoring report. Yeah, okay, right. Mandy, over to you first, I think.
Thank you, Chair. My name's Amanda Fletcher and I'm the Head of Finance that covers all major projects, and I'm here to present the 2 financial reports on the agenda today in the place of the named officers who are on annual leave. First report is the quarter 1 financial monitoring. This is obviously a regular report that provides the detail around the Council's forecasted financial position for this financial year, and this particular report is as at quarter 1. There are several recommendations in the report, and they each refer to the individual sections. And there's also an introductory section, 4.1, that provides the national context and outlines the multiple main considerations facing local government finance at this time. Beyond 4.1 is the detail of the report, and I will highlight the main sections in that. First of all, revenue monitoring. The forecast revenue outturn position is outlined in section 4.2. The current revenue forecast indicates that the Council will be £6.091 million overspent by the end of this financial year. At the start of the section, there's a summary table which breaks the forecast down into directorates, and in the table it also illustrates how this potential overspend will be funded from reserves if the current projected trajectory continues. So this is illustrative, and what this does is it shows how the budget risk reserve and the general fund reserve would have to be used, drawing down £3.3 million from the general reserve and £2.7 million from the budget risk reserve. However, this is not without risk, and the continued use of reserves isn't sustainable in the long term. Therefore, the report also details that there will be continued focus throughout the year on spending panels, spending moratoriums and vacancy control to help ensure the Council delivers a balanced position and to help mitigate and reduce any potential use of reserves. Section 4.3 of the report goes into the specific detail of the current mitigation plans. There'll also be ongoing reserve checks and challenges of forecast commitments so that wherever possible, we can free up resources to fund any final outturn pressure. The full detail of the reserves position is in section 4.4 and Appendix 1 of the report. A high-level analysis of the forecast overspend is contained in section 4.2.4, which shows a breakdown of the outturn across the 6 main themes that we base our analysis on. A significant part of the report, section 4.2.5 to section 4.2.58 and Appendix 7, contains the detail of the main variances, providing more narrative and information that underpins the revenue forecast. The second part of the report covers capital monitoring. Capital monitoring is summarised in section 4.5 and is currently reporting a revised forecast spend in this financial year of £226 million. This is a £275,000 difference from the original approved budget, and there's a breakdown of how this change has occurred in section 4.5.4 of the report. The reasons behind, the high-level reasons behind why the changes have taken place are explained in the main variances to budget section 4.5.6 and also Appendix 2. There are 3 other sections of the report to draw to your attention. Section 4.6 outlines the Treasury management position and the net debt position of the Council. Section 4.7 gives us a brief update on the HRA financial position, which is currently forecast to be on target. That is to use just over £3 million from the HRA reserve to fund its business as usual activities. And then the final section to highlight is section 4.8, and this provides some detail around the DSG position, which is currently at a deficit, a forecast deficit, of £10.8 million, which is a £1.3 million improvement from the deficit that was set at the beginning of the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. Councillor Poulter, there was a recommendation from the Executive Scrutiny Board. Would you like to just talk us through that?
I can, Chair, yes, because there was considerable discussion around the outturn position, concern and shock around the position, but also reflection on the fact that this Cabinet Chamber has, for 5 years, heard lectures around the use of reserves and the failure to make progress on capital spend, and yet in your first outturn, without wishing to over-politicise it, we're absolutely maxing out the 2 main reserves that are available to you and made little or no progress on the capital spend. But the main concern was around the lack of new initiatives, new savings and new ways of making up the money that you're spending from some sort of imaginary money tree on things like Ashgate Nursery and the Quad and all the spends that you've had so far at your cabinet meetings are being tallied up and kept a note of and will be brought back for your attention. But what
Thank you. I think you've covered the recommendation.
What the recommendation says is that they ask the executive for resolve.
Councillor Poulter?
Yes.
I think you've covered the recommendation. That's fine.
I don't consider I have, so I'll just finish it off and then we'll go from
Any contribution?
Yeah, I mean, my only concern is I think there is, and I understand there is, pending pay awards later in the year, and what sort of impact that's going to have on our turns going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Lassell. That's a valid point and something that needs to be factored into our budget considerations. But let's just be completely frank. I mean, I was going to start off by saying, Councillor Poulter, do you want to present this report? Because let's be honest with you, most of the Q1 spend has been done under your administration. The Council's financial position is absolutely dire. We've inherited a very, very serious situation. Chief Exec sat here next to me. I'm sure he'll agree with me. It's one of the biggest worries, and maybe Councillor Poulter doesn't want to hear any more of this. Bye, Councillor Poulter. But it's a very, very dire position. In 2018, sorry, Councillor Aswell, you're going to have to bear with me for a second and hear this now. But in 2018, when the previous administration took over, there was over £36 million in the budget risk reserve. And as you can see from page 1 of this report, at 1.1c, the budget risk reserve has a current financial forecast balance of 0. That's an absolutely unsustainable position. It's a position driven by 5 years of over-reliance on the budget risk reserve and 13 years of austerity driven by central government, which I'll repeat the figure, but I will refine this figure when I get a piece of work we're undertaking completed. £750 million is what Derby City Council has lost through austerity, and that's my own conservative with a small c calculation. How on earth we're expected to deliver the services our residents need, given everything else, the financial crisis, the cost of living crisis, the impact that record-breaking interest rates are having on personal budgets for residents, but also on the budgets of organisations like ours. The mini trust Kwarteng budget of last year, which is absolutely crippling many organisations, and we're still paying the price for that now. All of these factors together, I'm not surprised. I was going to say, because part of me feels sorry for him. I absolutely don't feel sorry for him. But I'm not surprised Councillor Poulter's got up and walked out of this meeting. This Q1 financial monitoring, I think, is a sobering reminder of the financial difficulties that this local authority is in. But let's be absolutely clear and hold the last 5 years of Conservative administration, budgeting badly, spending the reserves, and 13 years of Tory government who have absolutely hammered local government and, to be honest with you, the public sector generally, but particularly local government, without any sign of that money being put back. So I'll welcome, and it's a plea, all opposition groups that are represented here today, Reform and the Conservative group, to join us in any lobbying of government to make sure Derby gets a fair funding settlement in year if there's more money, but also making sure for the next financial year we get some of that money that's been taken back from us. Cabinet, any further comments? Councillor Dinser.
Yeah, I mean, I think really maximising funding for local services has got to be a priority. It really has been devastating over the last 13 years, as you said, Chair, about the massive cuts and drain of finances and resources from local government, which has meant that decisions have had to be made by different colour party groups on decisions about what to cut because of lack of funding. That is not a good situation. And after the Conservative 750 million drain from local government funding, it may be more, there's only so much you can do. But we will make the right choices, the right priorities, and look to see what we can get out of a budget which is dire, which is difficult. And I think the point you have made about inviting the opposition parties to join us to try to stem this flow of funding disappearing for us to deliver our services is something that we need to join together to campaign on and to talk to government about how that can be changed so that we can provide the services that elected members from all parties and officers want to provide for the people of Derby City. And they're forced to actually consider what to cut rather than what to actually develop and grow. So I think that's something that I think we should all join together and campaign to raise the concerns, highlight the issues, and look to see in year and in future years how we can actually reverse these massive cuts that have been happening to local government across the country, but we're concerned about here in Derby and what that means for the people of Derby.
Thank you, Councillor Dinser. Any other contribution? Yep, sure. Chief Exec Paul Simpson.
Thank you, thank you, Chair. I mean, I guess from my perspective as Chief Exec, the situation is indeed extremely challenging. And I guess I would just make the point in the context of the national picture, which Councillor Dinser quite rightly has just alluded to. I'm just looking at my laptop, and I'm not going to name the local authorities. They're in the public domain, so the information's out there. But there's 2 local authorities that just today have signalled Section 114 reports. Last week there were about another 5 or 6. This is now becoming a regular occurrence of local authorities reaching the end of the road in terms of their financial position. Now, that's not to say that that's where we're at, just for the avoidance of doubt. But the situation facing local government is an extremely challenging one. And I think it is incumbent on all of us, both politicians and officers, to do whatever we can to support the need for either additional funding for local government. Now, that's not necessarily from my perspective. Clearly, Derby is top of the list, but it's bigger than that. This is about the sustainability of local government as a sector, and the sustainability of local services for local people funded by local taxation. So I guess my point is, as difficult as our financial position is, we are one of a growing number of local authorities with a very similar story. And I guess the question I would pose is, what do we need to do as a sector to address that? And there are clearly a number of potential solutions which I'm not going to go into here, but the reality is something needs to happen for local authorities to remain sustainable, so that we can continue to provide good quality local services that local people, local businesses want and need. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, and just to answer Councillor Poulter's concerns from exec scrutiny, there are a number of pages in the report which talk about the mitigations that officers are looking at to make sure this year we bring the budget as close to balance as we can, given the current position after Q1. Okay, so with that, Cabinet recommendations at 2.1 to note and 2.2 to approve. All those in favour, please. Thank you. That's carried. Okay, moving on to the final item of business for today, item 12, compliance with contract and financial procedure rules. Yes, Mandy Fletcher again, please.
Thank you, Chair. The report deals with 4 items, which I'll go through briefly individually. Just let me know if you want me to stop. First recommendation is to approve a procurement exercise to establish a provider who can arrange the sale of external business advertising space on the Council's refuse collection vehicles. The Street Pride team are looking to work with an external supplier who can oversee the sale and creation of external business advertising on the side of a proportion of the Council's refuse collection vehicles. It's felt that an external provider with experience of managing advertising space on such a unique asset could support the Council develop this income opportunity. They do not anticipate any cost to the Council for entering into the contract with the service provider. The
just go through all four.
Okay, yeah. The second recommendation is to approve a tender with the East Midlands and Mid Anglia Libraries Consortium at a value of £960,000 for library stock and materials. Derby Libraries is proposing to go out to tender for library stock with 11 other authorities as a part of this consortium. This will allow Derby to benefit from larger discounts as being a part of the larger group. If the council were to tender alone, it's anticipated that the discounts would either be hugely reduced or potentially not given at all, with the possibility of not even being considered by book suppliers as there's a limited number of providers. Recommendation number 3 is to delegate approval to submit plans and, if successful, bid for and accept the Local Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Fund provided by central government. The council has been provisionally allocated up to £1.7 million worth of capital and £291,000 worth of revenue capability funding under the government's levy fund. However, this indicative allocation, the funding is subject to their acceptance of our plans on how to spend the money. The business case for this funding is to be submitted by November 2023, and delegated approval is requested to finalise plans, bid for, and if the grant conditions are acceptable, accept this funding. The funding will enable the installation of charge points on street or in public car parks so that residents without off-street parking will have more access to charging points closer to home. And then the final, I think, 3 recommendations is all against one item, and it's around approving to increase the budget to the St Benedict Catholic Voluntary Academy Expansion Scheme, and increasing the budget from £6.1 million up to nearly £6.4 million, which is an increase of £200,000. This will constitute a variation of the grant agreement that's already in place. The variation is needed because further design, planning and contractor engagement was required, plus the increase in construction market costs. These have all added up to the overall increase to the forecast costs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. Just covering off a couple of those. The first one, absolutely anything we can do to maximise our income for the council to offset some of the impact of austerity is absolutely important to us. Just like we're looking at accommodation in the council house, if we can sell advertising space on our refuse vehicles, that's an absolutely positive point. The tender process to acquire more library stock absolutely demonstrates our, another commitment or further commitment to the confidence that I've got in ensuring we find a sustainable and viable solution for the provision of libraries across the whole city. So that's a strong sign and a good investment in making sure that happens as well. The local electric vehicle infrastructure, Councillor Swan, if you want to just touch on that, and maybe Councillor Whitby about the St Rolf Sherwin Catholic Multi-Academy Trust.
Yeah, I mean, I really welcome the opportunity for us to expand our electric charging points. We know that whilst it might not be something that we can see an immediate change to, certainly over the next 2 to 3 years, it will help us certainly to reach our net zero targets, which we've already pledged for 2030. So it's fantastic news.
Thank you, Councillor Swan. And Councillor?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, obviously, fully support the extra money for the expansion of Benedict's. It's already been to Cabinet in February. It's for 180 places. We obviously very much need it, but of course the costs from February to August have gone up that much due to the economy, that more money is required. That's the main reason. So yeah, I'm afraid that's what we need to pay.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Whitby. With that then, item 12, page 1, and going over onto page 2, could you indicate your approval of recommendations 2.1 through to 2.6. Thank you, brilliantly, that's carried. If you just all bear with me for a couple of moments more, please. I think that's the agenda covered, make sure. Yep, it is the agenda covered. You may or may not be aware, but today is, due to holidays and entitlement and that sort of, is the last cabinet meeting that our Director for Leisure, Culture and Tourism, Claire Davenport, is with us before she moves to pastures new from Derby City Council after having worked here for now 13 years, I believe. For those of you who know Claire, and I'm sure most people in this room do know Claire, she's a super leader that we've had in this local authority, and had the privilege to have her here for those 13 years. Delivered some of the most significant projects in the city over that period of time, as well as keeping the eye on the day-to-day operational affairs of such a large and important area for the council. A huge success, Derby Arena's been an absolutely iconic building, but the way that's been managed and then brought into operation, and all the activities happening there, the creation of Derby Live, and how that's now become an excellent service in delivering for our city. Councillor Dinser has been busy around parks, celebrating the Green Flag Awards, but the fantastic parks that have been created now in Claire's tenure here in Derby has been absolutely amazing. Let's not forget the Museum of Making. Museums are under huge pressure and threat when Claire arrived here, and creating that trust model and securing the museums here in Derby, and then working with the trust to secure record amounts of investment, and now being considered as, for an award of Museum of the Year, just as, again, a huge testament into how things have moved on. The creation of Derbyshire Institute of Sport. We all remember the Olympics very well, and in 2012 there was no athlete from Derby and Derbyshire, I believe, and next year in Paris there'll be 10 representatives from our area. That's pretty impressive work at a grassroots level to encourage and support athletes to make it to the highest level. We'll all remember the memorable Olympic torch relay here in Derby, which came here, the Commonwealth baton, again, which came here. Stars like Bradley Wiggins performing at Derby Arena. Huge names, a massive kudos for the city. It's a very, very difficult job being a director in this council and most councils, given what we've just been talking about around our budget position. But Claire's always kept a calm head, managed, like I say, her operational duties and significant pressures, which not all directors see in managing large capital spends as well, and projects, and always been laser focused on the outcomes for residents in our city. An inspiring leader who's always managed to, in some of the most depressing times, motivate her teams and drive strong performance in her teams, and as well as making strong partnerships with various organisations across the city. I almost forgot to mention Moorways, actually, then, and not just the actual sports centre and the swimming pool, the fantastic sports centre and swimming pool when Claire, as the director, worked for me as the project manager. It was a brilliant experience, that, only joking. Claire was absolutely, again, inspirational in making that happen, and then securing the future of the whole of Moorways with the complex there, the athletics track, and I'm sure there's more good news to come around there. But the creation of a And we did lots of visits, didn't we, Claire, to other cities, sometimes getting criticised for putting petrol in our own cars and driving out to Derby to go and deliver what has got to be one of the best swimming pool and gym complexes, council-owned complexes in the whole country. So on behalf of myself, Claire, really, the Cabinet and the whole council, really, thank you very much for your dedication to Derby, to its residents, and we wish you all the best for whatever the future holds.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very privileged to have worked for Derby City Council. So thank you enormously to everybody who's accommodated the ambition that's come with the passion to deliver for our residents. I have to say it's been a wonderful journey. Challenging at times, we all know that, but to work with such great people, supported by senior management and councillors, along with a fantastic city full of partners and stakeholders who are as passionate about this city going places as we are. So, you know, thank you so much for taking the time to say what you have. It's really appreciated. It'll be sad to go in one sense, but it's a new chapter for both Derby City Council and for myself. And I hope there's a massive legacy for people to use all the fantastic facilities and services in this city for decades to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Okay, and definitely a massive legacy. So with that, we'll call and then close this meeting. Thank you, everybody.